Hey, George.
How are you, gentlemen?
I guess the master controller wasn't awake early this morning.
Okay, I've got new light in here and I'm not sure. Ooh, don't look up. Okay. Oh, you know what I haven't done? That's why. When you spend your life on Zoom, it's you got everything. You guys can't see it around here, but I got lights, I got microphones, I got all sorts of
Like in a studio, right?
sort of, yeah, not quite, but I've got some additions coming in here. So, good morning, Joe. Hey,
Morning.
Joe, thank you very much. I met with Joe L yesterday. He's a great guy. Joe V.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how he got referred to me, but yeah.
I think through the church.
Anyways,
Yeah,
through who?
the church. He
Yeah, I don't
focuses
know.
on.
I'd have to think about it for a little while, but yeah, I figured it'd be a good match for what we got going on, and seemed to be kind of looking for a home. So
Yeah, he's a great guy, really knowledgeable, and so we shall see. He and I are meeting again on Wednesday.
good.
What does everybody else have going on? Well, not everybody else. Sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to exclude you. What does everybody have going on?
Well, I'm enjoying your book, George.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
I've been plowing through it diligently. One of the things and maybe this is just me being a nitpicker, but you make reference to an appendix in the book, and then I look in the book and I don't see an appendix. I just want to know if you knew that. That's all.
I did not know that, Mike. That's what
Well, I don't know
paid.
if it's. I mean, you're talking about checklists and things of that nature. I didn't.
Oh yeah, you know what that is? You know what that ended up being? And I'm sorry they didn't catch the reference to the appendix. If you hit because we haven't hit the publication date, I haven't completely fleshed it out. But if you hit that QR code that's inside the jacket, that'll take you to a landing page. In that landing page, I wanted something more dynamic.
Okay.
So
Well, it says the actual print says in the appendix to this book. So I don't know. I'm just because I was going to look for it, and I said, "Gee,
you're a detail guy." You'd think with the number of hours that we had all poured. I mean,
oh yeah, I know,
incredible number of hours with a complete.
It really has no bearing on the content of what you're writing, but me being the little CPA head that I am, when I see stuff like that, and I go back and say, "Well, where is it?"
Where is it? Oh, I do the same thing.
I just point that out to you. I don't know if it's worth anything, but I just point that out to you.
You know what it is? It is what it is. But I'm remembering a conversation where someone, not me, said, "We don't need to change a word. It's good to go." I'm like, okay, then I will sign off on it. Anyway,
That's good.
You know what? You know where the buck stops, though, right here.
No, I don't think it
signed off on it. So
it doesn't detract. Listen, it doesn't detract at all from the book at all. It's just a
thanks,
little.
Mike. Have you?
Go ahead, sir.
It's very interesting to be talking. I was on with one of your colleagues, hey Andy, who had a copy of it, and he had tabs highlighted. He was quoting it back to me, and it was really interesting. And it made for a very interesting, not an interesting conversation because it's because about the content I created, but we were able to have a conversation using the language that's in the book that was really relating with each other very easily. So
I'm about halfway through it, and I couldn't get all the way through it because unfortunately yesterday was tax day. I had to get my tax returns filed, and what a nightmare that was because I filed in about 30 states because I was a partner in a CPA firm that did business in 30 states. So, had to get that all done yesterday.
You're not going to be sad to be rid of that.
No, I'm not going to miss that wonderful opportunity of filing in 30 states and, having them owe me $20. And I had to send a check out to California for $58 yesterday. And I said to myself, if I don't send this out, they'll probably come knocking on my door looking for it.
California would with a $1,000 fine.
My $58 is matters to them. So I rushed down to the post office and mailed it in certified and all that crap. But and I think Barry can relate to tax filing shit. But anyway, that's past me. So I'm going to finish this book this week for sure. But yeah, awesome. I started it and it's hard to put it down. So kudos to you. I think it's a great work.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it very much. And
I saw Barry's little thing about you here. He offered a nice little praise for the advisor here. Barry, you're right behind Larry. I don't know how Larry got top billing, but he paid more.
It's alphabetical.
I told Michael he paid more money.
That's funny.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah, man. I got a bunch of comments there, but I'm trying to. Well, I can't. This is being recorded and will be put out there, so I'll keep my comments in my head for once.
So, George, my question to you was when I was reading this, and you were talking about the growth conversation, and then and then the deep dive, and I sent you an email about this, right? So I'm trying to, in my simple mind, I understand the growth conversation, I have that pretty much down, but trying to figure out how do you is clarity one, the surface level tool. Is that part of the growth? Is that an extension, or is it part of the growth conversation, or is that the deep analysis? Or is the deep analysis clarity too? So this clarify it for. Sorry to use that word, just clarify it for me.
So as a good facilitator, I should turn the question around. But in the interest of, because you asked me that question, so I think we have the growth conversation. Where does this story go? Right? Where do you want to end up? Where does where does your story end up? And at some point, your personal and professional goals intersect on the horizon. And what does that need to look like? And importantly, what happens if you don't successfully get to that point? And then we pivot and we say, okay, well, if your goal, to get to your goal, we need to understand the business's ability, the business's capacity to get you to that goal. And that's where clarity level one becomes either part of the tail end or the beginning of the next phase of the conversation. But it absolutely belongs in these initial client interviews. And the growth conversation may or may not take place in one sitting. It depends on several factors. But let's say that it does happen in one sitting, just for imagination's sake. And at the end of that, be like, well, the conversation is really, listen, we'll use Ed as my client. Listen, Ed, I only work with businesses where you and I are confident that you're going to generate a return on the investment of time and money you're going to make in this process. And to have a better understanding, I think you and I need to have a common understanding of the business. And then we can use clarity level one to create that common understanding, that lingua franca around the business and where it is today. And then we have a number of options, but where is the business today? And as part of that, we can talk about the range of values that comes out of clarity one. We can talk about the, equity planning module. We use the equity planning module to start talking about growth rates, terminal value, et cetera, because, what we're positioning ourselves as correctly is someone who understands how to, what goes into the strategic capacity and, in this instance, importantly, the value capacity of the business and making profit and value growth actionable. So that's this guy's take on it. And then the deep analysis would be like, so then, Mike, from there, you could say there are several paths, right? You can go down a path that doesn't involve clarity or growth drive. You can say, okay, well, now that I have an understanding, what do you think your senior team, this is what I recommend. What do you think your senior team perspective on this would be? By the way, just did another alignment report, and the alignment was, as we essentially always see, was all over the map. There was no alignment. And what's fascinating, guys, is in these senior leadership alignment, and this is telling, right? You'll have different senior leaders put in different gross and net income numbers, and not off by 100,000, off by millions of dollars. The one we just did, I think one had put it in at 11 and someone else put it in at 7 and small change. And the 7 and small change was a very precise number. I don't know what that person's role was, but it was a very precise, it was down to the dollar. And I'm like, okay,
probably the CFO, George.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's the right number. Yeah. So, and then once we've done this, and again, imagine the risk profile that you're presenting. So you're saying to the business owner, no problem. Let's see if it makes sense to do business together. Hey, let's see if your senior team agrees. They don't agree. We can run a workshop. Hey, we can, let's get the senior team together and complete dimension 1 and dimension 2 of the deep analysis. We have a number of projects paid, valuable projects, very valuable to the client, valuable to you as advisors. And now we're saying, okay, well, now that we have this deep understanding, do you still, is your goal still X? I can help you create a plan. Does that interest you? Yes, it does. Or, here's your report and good luck to you. We have a number of different options. So all of which you'll notice are iterative, and we haven't sat down and said, listen, my retainer is $10,000 a month. You need to guarantee me a year. And all the CEO hears is $120,000 flying out the window. They don't, even though that is a wise investment on their part, all they hear is the P&L. They don't hear the balance sheet. impact it'll have. So
the balance sheet impact, and they won't find the value on their balance sheet because it
No.
won't be there.
no, I think I'm
The
talking.
value is
Yeah.
the value is the building the intangible value, the intangibles of their company, which will not appear on their balance sheet.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that in the accounting.
No, I'm sorry.
meant
I
that
just looking at
rather
it.
than hearing us as a hit to P&L, they need to be hearing us as a contribution to value. Is how I should more properly say that, Mike. You're absolutely 100% right. Andy, you started to say?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because clarity is a tool, and the growth conversation is a tool, and you can use it in a variety of ways. And George has described one way to include clarity towards the end of the growth drive, that conversation, because that conversation may be ongoing, and that's what you feel that the client wants and needs from the discussion. So it's all about that, listening to the client and saying, what are the tools I have and where would I use them? So for example, you could feel that this client is flying in the growth conversation, is eager, confident, wants to move on. So I would move directly to say, okay, let's move to proposal, where I propose we do a deep dive straight away in clarity deep dive. So if they're really flying, I might have a client who is not quite sure. I'm sensing is not quite sure, and we've got value out of the conversation. So I would say, okay, well, next step, let's do clarity. Let's just see where your business is, and then use the context of the growth conversation to add to the clarity result and say, in our conversation, you said this is the result, and it sort of builds on that to try to move them forward to the next step, obviously, which is going to be an engagement, a paid engagement, and deep dive. A third way of using it is to use clarity before you even have the growth conversation. To sense with a client that this is a way of just moving them along. We could either use the other engagement tool, but we could use clarity before the conversation to get them to the conversation based on, again, the results of clarity. So I think there are a variety of ways that you can use it, the tools, dependent on the client themselves and what you're sensing that the client wants and where they are in terms of moving them on to a paid engagement.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you.
George, I'm just going to add to Andy. Tomorrow I have a IT husband and wife that own an IT company. It's our third interaction. The proposal's already in. We have not done clarity. Why? Because they've been very headstrong. This is just about sales and marketing. It's not about anything else. Well, I'm beginning to think it's about some other things potentially. And to me, clarity could be a tool, because they're open-minded, to see possibilities of what, and it's still going to be sales and marketing, but what might be some of the strengths to support it, what might be some of the barriers, the weaknesses, internally, externally, that might get in the way. And I think the clarity could help us have the conversation that we have not had yet.
Yeah, I love that. Anyone else?
Literally building on what you just stated a little bit. You were called basically for a sales and marketing issue, and every other aspect of every other area of the business is affected by sales and marketing. And using the strategic, I love that term, strategic capacity. If you were to be successful and increase, for sake of conversation, increase sales by 30%, what other areas of the business does that affect? And perhaps the conversation doesn't necessarily have to be around, well, let's do this clarity tool. It could be around, let's talk about your senior management team and how an increase in revenue in sales would affect senior management or your gross profit or, whatever. Okay. But I think using that sales and marketing as the catalyst, and then entering all these other aspects, can be a very interesting and eye-opening conversation for both the advisor and for the owner of the business.
Yeah, Barry, good insight. They don't have the capacity to grow.
Well, you need to point that out.
Yeah.
It was like, as an example, I received a call several years ago. I was on vacation, but I received a call, and this very frustrated president of this CEO of this company, it's a family business, was mandated to increase revenues. I think it was, 50, 100%, whatever it was. Well, one of my first questions was, what's the capacity of your manufacturing facility?
Right.
And they said, we could never do that. They wanted to go from 15 million to 30 million. Well, that's wonderful. Everybody would like to do that, but how's all this other stuff affected by it? And can you really do it? And, can you be a $20 million company, but yet be extraordinarily more profitable?
Yeah.
That's a conversation I think a lot of owners really don't fully understand.
Yeah.
How's all this other stuff affected?
I'll just jump in. Andy and I were just in a meeting where everyone's favorite phrase, client doesn't know what they don't know, was used, and that's applicable here. So you can't get into big argument with the client, but if you go down and try to fix what they said needs to be fixed, and then was just discussed, there's other issues that need to be addressed first, then that's not necessarily good for you. You had a short-term win, but a longer-term problem.
Yeah, you hit that right on the head, though, Steve. I just had a call this morning to take a look, and they wanted to do a preliminary valuation because somebody's attacking the company and would like to buy it, right? He's now at his lowest point in 3 years in performance, but he's in a niche that's very, very hot. So, the fellow thinks he can suddenly sell it for 4 times what it was worth 3 years ago rather than what it's going to be worth today. And the referral person said, I hope you can bring him into reality before he tries to negotiate himself into a hole that he can never get out of.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was it who said, you can get any price you want. You're just not going to like the terms.
Correct. Oh, exactly.
Yeah, 10-year earnout.
Exactly.
I did one in about 1997 at a seminar, and one of the big things is that the big time was a lot of service companies were selling for millions of dollars. And I said, I'll buy any company in this room for at least $1 million. And the person raises his hand and says, okay, I like to sell. I said, I'll $1 a year for the next 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And the person said, well, I don't want to sell. I said, see, you didn't like the terms, but I gave
No
you
interest
price.
either. No interest on that.
Well, exactly.
Exactly. Seller financed.
Yeah, seller financing.
So speaking of valuation, the Exit Planning Institute Fort Lauderdale chapter this week on Thursday, we're going to have a talk about valuation and how there are many different types of valuations out there that people are not really aware of. They think that, one size fit. I think a lot of people think that, I shouldn't say that, but I think people are confused. I'll say that people are confused. So, but we all know there are different valuations for different purposes. So, and I'm kind of I'm the moderator of the panel, and I'm going to try to dial into the collective genius of this group this morning. But I have these experts who are valuation folks on a panel, and, we're talking about what valuations are appropriate for planning purposes, right? Because what we use valuation for, mostly for our purposes, right, George? We use it for planning. We're not trying to justify and substantiate the value of a gift for IRS purposes. So
no, we want to have a good professional perspective on what the value is.
correct.
You're right, for planning purposes.
So the question, I'm going to ask you guys, what kind of question would I ask the valuation people if we're doing planning, whether it be exit or business planning? What type of valuation do you think is appropriate for that purpose?
I think that's a great question.
Would that be a good, or is there any other question do you think I should throw at them to kind of flesh out, this topic? Because again, everyone has their own, and there's a lot of ideas that are out there that are, that people get confused around.
Hey, Bob.
Well, I think the biggest thing that I look at, and Mike, is the difference between an income approach and a market approach. That's very applicable to most businesses, unless you get something that's very building/equipment, then you become tied to an asset approach. And the biggest thing that most people don't realize, and that is when you have large manufacturing facilities, sometimes the asset coupled with other balance sheet items becomes the total opportunity value of why somebody would acquire it.
Yeah.
So one of the investment bankers I know, he tells me that he doesn't look at the income approach, the discount DCF approach. He just says, I look at market multiples, because that's what we really are interested in. We're trying to sell your business. What is the market going to pay for it? So he dispenses with all those other approaches.
And the negative part of doing that is he's looking only at revenue in most cases and trying to derive the market multiple out of it. And many times, as I cited the person I had in Virginia, I got big improvements because we were looking at market multiples that wanted to be run off of EBITDA. And so the sooner we spent a year cleaning up the EBITDA so that we jumped it from, a 2 times to a 4 times. But we spent 12 months doing it, and he got more than what he wanted, achieving that. In addition, he kept a $10 million piece of real estate.
Well, to build on that a little bit, I recently was involved in a small company. We went to market a year and a half before the company was actually sold. And the investment banker / broker said, if you do this, this, and this, I can get you more money. And this, and this was exactly what I was working on with the client. And what his comment was really accelerated that activity. And it was basically, in the small business, it was the gross margins and it was owner dependence. And by fixing fixing those two things, they got $1 million more for this $5 million revenue company.
So Barry, when you say gross margins,
that's why I have trouble. No disrespect to any of the business valuation people, but I had trouble with valuations because to me they're theoretical, and it really comes down to what is somebody going to be willing to pay, and what's the standard of how to get to that within the investment banking community.
Well, what they apply the willing buyer, willing seller. If I've got a buyer that'll pay the price and you're willing to sell it, I mean, it may not be fair market value. It may be just a willing buyer, willing seller, Barry.
Right.
And there's no correlation to fair market value. It doesn't mean anything. That's just a term. But the reality is that's what's negotiated settlement.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the investment bankers that I know say that they only look to market data. They look at recent transactions in the industry. They look at the multiples being used. They use that as their measurement of fair market value for a company. They don't go into as you pointed out, Barry pointed out, most of these reports, when you read them, especially for the IRS, it's between a hypothetical buyer and seller, right? And so it's like, well, we're not hypothetical here. We're trying to get into the real world. So they migrate toward market data, the market approach, if you will, for planning purposes, because that's where you're going to go. And so I think
you have an investment banker on your panel, Michael?
Yes.
Perfect.
No, he's going to tell me that because he already told me that. He goes, we don't do DCF income approach. No.
Right.
We go and look and we see what companies in your industry have been selling for, and we have that data, so we know it's going to be it's either a multiple of revenue or normalized EBITDA, right? And then that's what we look at.
I guess it depends on what the objective is.
Yeah.
If the objective is just to make a quick buck or several bucks, then okay. But if you're earlier on the process and you're trying to serve the business owner, then you damn well better be looking at some of the stuff that Clarity looks at, because that's going to, that affects the multiple in reality.
Correct.
Yeah.
No doubt. The multiple is affected. Yeah, the multiple is affected by the scoring you have on strategic capacity. No doubt about it.
Well, and Michael, on your committee or on your hopefully on your panel, you have somebody from the ESOP world who takes a whole different look at, because you get the divergence of the investment banking people and the ESOP, and then you get valuation people, and you get 3 totally different perspectives on what they believe the value of the business can be. Barry,
Well, it's interesting.
You raise a good point. Because there is a difference between valuation for ESOP purposes, and because that's willing buyer. I mean, that's more hypothetical, right? Than a market approach.
Well, isn't there a different value? I mean, there's different ways you can sell. You can transition out of a business. Isn't there a different value for all of them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're trying to.
So it'd be interesting to have Michael, we have called a valuation debate, okay, with your panel. Put a liquidator on there, okay, as an example, or put somebody does recaps.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to listen to that conversation. I wish I was in Florida. I would go.
Yeah, we're going to have it. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And I think a lot of people have asked for a presentation on valuation because, again, and I agree with what has been said. They're all valuations are not the same. I mean, they're appropriate for different purposes, right? So the one I'm familiar with from a tax perspective that you use to back up and justify the value of a gift for gift tax and estate tax purposes is a totally different valuation than what you would use for an ESOP, totally different valuation than you use for a market approach. I mean, a totally different valuation than you use if you had a dispute, a divorce. I mean, so one size does not fit all is the overarching message. But then again, people need to understand the differences and the nuances between amongst the various methods. So,
and that most clients are going to show up with numbers. Many clients are going to show up with numbers that among the 9 of us, we know are probably not. Once they go through the sieve, the numbers are going to look different, right?
Right. And the other point too, I'm going to try to draw this out, is we can look at a company in the same industry with the same EBITDA, right? The same industry, same EBITDA, maybe the same geography. Doesn't necessarily, the fact there is no, the reality is that they will have different values.
They will.
Even though their EBITDAs are the same because of what we do, like when we go, it's a matter of, what the buyer does during due diligence to look at the things that Clarity One looks at, right? So if they go through all those 24 objectives and they say, well, wait a minute, we see a lot of risk here, then even though the EBITDA is the same, they're going to offer a lower multiple, right?
Yeah, for a number of, there are a number of different risk factors there. And when you get into Clarity Two, we have
right. So profitability, similar profitability, where profitability alone does not predict the ultimate value. Just the profit number. I mean, because there's all the other intangibles around the business. We call them the four human capital: the human capital, social capital, structural capital, social capital, culture, all that stuff. And according to EPI, that accounts for about 80% of the value of your company. Those intangibles account for close to 80% of the value. All right, and you can't see that by looking at just the number.
Yeah.
Michael, how does other factors play in on the balance sheet and financial? I know, Ed, you were talking about assets before. How does cash flow fit in the value?
Cash flow is, I guess, EBITDA is usually more normalized. EBITDA, I think people tell me, is a proxy for cash flow.
Free cash flow, yeah.
So some people use normalized EBITDA and some people use cash flow. They'll come up with free cash flow, another calculation. But they'll apply a multiple to either one. But again, according to EPI, that's only the profitability of your company is really 20% of the value. The other 80% has to do with the things that George has in Clarity One, is how good is your management team? How good is your customer relationships? Are they broad? Do you have a concentration of customers? Do you have documented systems? Do you have a good culture? Do you, and how easy is it for you to hire and retain people? All those things, from what I understand, that accounts for any turn above 2x. 1 to 2x is your financial performance. Anything above 2x is the value of these intangibles, which, again, you won't find them on your balance sheet because they're not there. Because GAAP doesn't measure them and you can't quantify them, but they are valuable.
Just FYI, there are different opinions on that percentage you just quoted.
I'm sure there are.
Like one community I'm in is like 60%. So 60, if I was doing it, I'd say 60 to 80%. Anyway, it's more than half of your value.
Right.
Well, and it gets down to transferability, right? I mean, that's what
and then again, too, the other thing, I talk to people about this. They say, well, I'm not going to sell my business to an outside third party. What do I care about this? And I tell them, well, that's what they say. I'm going to transfer it to my kids, or I'm going to transfer it to my key people. And I tell them, look, the things that make your company valuable to an outside third party are the same things that you want to have in place for your successor owners.
That's
right?
Exactly right.
Well said.
You would want the same things in place, because if you're selling to your key people, that company, they're going to rely on the company's future cash flows to pay you, or to pay the loan that they're going to get to pay you. And if you're going to transfer it to your kids, you want the business to be robust. And by the way, when we go through this and you see all the issues that you have with regard to these 24 growth objectives and where you need to work on them, wouldn't it be a great exercise now with your kids to go through that and develop them along with them? And you're almost training them for their successor role. So I think because I get some people telling me I'm not selling to an outside third party. Look, you guys are telling me that 70 to 80% of third party sales fail.
Well, and Mike, there's something I'd like to tease out, a point that you just made. By the way, Bob, welcome. I think this is your first time in the Coffee Klatsch. Welcome, man. A company that can pass due diligence And so due diligence exists for the private capital markets to identify the best of the best and to invest in the best of the best so that they have low risk, high return, right? Or if they're going to invest downstream in a more risky company, that they pay less money for it to account for the risk in the business. All right, that aside, if due diligence then identifies is the lens through which the private capital markets identify best-in-class businesses, then bringing the strategic capacity of your business up to that standard doesn't mean you need to monetize, but it does mean that you have a business that's going to be easier to run, that has predictable profits and cash flow, predictable, sustainable, non-chaotic growth, and if and when you so decide, high M&A preparedness. And that's, and we have time to design a business that may have strategic value, or, that may have, or may be perfectly positioned for an ESOP, or. And we didn't even get into the tax consequences of these transfer vehicles. ESOP, you can take a lower dollar, but you still get more money at the deal table.
Well, the other thing too, George, is remember this. I'm going to throw another factoid or statistic at you, right? 50% of business transitions are done for involuntary purposes. Yeah. 50%. So yes, you want to build a transferable business because when you decide to leave, but you may not be able to decide. Something may happen to you. You may get disabled. You may, God forbid, die. There could be all kinds of contingencies that don't get you to that point where you can decide. But wouldn't it be great if your business was ready, right? Wouldn't it be great if your business is positioned for, as we say in the exit plan, the 5 Ds, right? Wouldn't it be great that, hey, something happens to me, I want the business to be sold or transferred. Well, you're basically, you've built something that can be done even if you're not the one that pulls the trigger because you're not available to do it, but it's available to be, it's exit ready.
Yeah. And mitigating owner dependence is, needs to be, that's why it's, Act 1, Scene 1, the first dimension, first growth driving objective is effective senior leadership team and reducing that owner dependence, which actually can unleash growth for a variety of reasons. Yeah.
Hey, Michael, you'd be doing a service to all of us business advisors if you would do a mind meld with every business owner so they understood what you just said.
Well, I do, but, they get, they're too busy. It's typical. Typical owner is just too busy working and not on, they know that, but, a lot of them wait until a year or two, maybe 18 months before they get out. And then they start scrambling to kind of dress themselves up, like staging a house to sell, then they start, putting coats of paint on it and, and trying to dress it up so that they can, and it works. I mean, they'll get some more value, but they don't know how much they're leaving on the table by not starting early. So starting early is important. Yep. But I'm with you.
The longer they take, the less disruptive all this work is. I mean,
so it's all about managing the fear of the unknown, guys. The biggest fear for the business owner is, what if someone, something bad happens in my way to market? And so he's never heard a bad story about somebody waiting too long, but he always hears a bad story about the guy that tried to do something and failed. So, there's stories being told among the entrepreneur world that it just may or may not be, nobody wants to tell the good stories. They always want to tell the bad stories, right? Bad stories travel fast. So managing the fear of the outcomes is really what we're thinking about doing. So you really look at, from an audit perspective, what kind of level of audit do you need? And you guys are talking about evaluations. What kind of level of evaluation you need? Obviously, it depends. So, but managing the fear when it comes to an audit perspective, do I need a review or do I need a full blown, spend the $15,000 or $20,000 now, whatever, on a full blown? So how much do I have to spend? It depends. How much fear I'm trying to manage? It depends. So look at it from a fear perspective and what's going through the CEO, the owner's mind. And I think that's the kind of starting point, and then try to reduce the fear from there.
Well, it's interesting, Joe, because we're really trying to educate them out of a fairy tale. Like does this resonate, guys? I'm going to work as long as I want to work, and then I'm going to sell the business for what I need to sell it for. And that is the basic fairy tale I mean, I've stood in front of, I don't know how many hundred valuators and use that, and everybody bows their head, CPAs, nods their head up and down, because that's the common fairy tale in which we believe. And we've all, if you think about the data that we've just shared here, it is a fairy tale, right? That is not the way this is going to play out. But you can't just show up and say, hi, you believe in a fairy tale and you better hire me, right? So that's not going to go anywhere. We need to educate them, to your point, Joe, educate them and create a little fear. That's the goal implicated. Okay, Joe, what happens if you don't sell your business and net $10 million? What happens? Let's talk about that for a few minutes. And
and that's what we always talk about, getting to the emotion. Yeah, and that's our opportunity. When we identify the emotion, move from the intellectual to that feeling, that emotion, that's our opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Michael, getting back to your panel, several years ago, I did a presentation to the Illinois Financial Planning Association at a conference they had, and I talked about exit planning and all this other crap. So anyway, I said to them, how do you, when you're doing planning, how do you determine the value of the business, or how do you consider the business in the planning? So I would say that most of the audience said they take the owner's word for what the business is worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I said, well, how can you really do that, and give your owner really some factual information? Because are they going to, show a tremendous value, or are they going to diminish the value? And none of them really could answer that question. It was an interesting discussion. I don't remember some of the details, but I do remember the question I asked them and the response.
And Barry, in fact, guys, show of hands. Who has experienced that the business owner shows up and says, oh, well, for my industry, it's 2 to 6 times earnings, and I'm going to get 6 times earnings. So that's me. I'm going to get 18 million. Yeah, all of us, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you that they're
back to that fairy tale.
And they'll tell you that the people that they met at their industry conference all told them that that's the right number. And
that's right.
Yeah,
man. Unrealistic expectations of value. That's
probably why a lot of deals don't close, is because of that gap, right? There's a gap between what the owner thinks it's worth, and then when a buyer comes in and does due diligence and says, "Whoa, wait a minute, it ain't worth that much." And that's how these deals fall apart, right? And
Mike, you just brought us full circle. So if we're trying to educate the business owner, we're saying, listen, Diane, yes, you've built a business that could be worth, you have latent value of $15 million. However, and I'll shorthand it, due to company specific risk, due to a lack of strategic capacity, right now, let's talk about you monetizing at half that. And by the way, your value capacity is 42. So let's just put a line through M&A right now. It's not available to you as you're currently run. Now let's start. Now we're starting to readjust. And what's cool, and what you guys report back, is that the business owner hears themselves saying, we have 24 growth driving objectives. The business owner hears herself or himself telling you, I'm not top of the charts in some, most, or any of these growth driving objectives. And that's part of our early education of the client, which all of you come back and say, this is a conversation that really, these are punches that land.
Just FYI, the IBBA did a study of brokers, and that study said the number one reason for businesses don't sell is because of the unrealistic expectations of the value.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Well, so John Brown and I at the conference are going to we're going to put on we're going to have a joint conversation, and transferable value is the, it's under the rubric of transferable value. And you guys, you all know, it'll be very interactive. So
I know John.
Yeah, he's a consummate pro. I'm really enjoying working with him.
He's the founder of the Business Enterprise Institute, BEI.
Yeah.
And I got his exit planning certification through his process, which is very robust. It's a tough one to get. It's not like attend a class for a week and take an exam. It's like complete 8 or 9 different online courses, take an exam after each one of them, and then submit 2 case studies. Yeah. So it's a little more, it takes about 5 or 6 months to go through, but he's a good guy. I mean, he's very knowledgeable, and you met him, right? So he's,
and guys, they are focusing hard on what they call owner-focused planning, right? So the business is a major part of the owner-focused planning. If we look at the business and some of the issues we've discussed, how do we bring sophisticated insurance product, investment grade insurance products in to mitigate some of this risk, to pay for a successor, deferred comp, all the things that insurance can help us deliver. And it's fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing how they tackle it. So, hey, Bob, do you have any questions for the group? It's your first time in. You're just getting flooded with information.
Well, thanks for letting me in. I really appreciate that, George, and everybody else. So at this point, I'm just going to sit here and listen, George.
Yeah,
everybody's knowledge. So I appreciate that, gentlemen.
Yes,
George,
Bob.
you could diversify your group, though. I'm just teasing you, George.
This is a diverse group. We have Andy from Great Britain.
We're multicultural.
And half the people have hair, and half the people don't have hair or white hair.
Some guys have half their hair.
Very diverse. Very diverse.
Too funny.
Okay.
One way to think about this, switching gears just a tad, but working my Vistage members, one of the early things we did was get the insurance product, Keyman Life Insurance replacement product. What hesitant to push the gas on the business is hesitant to what, who's going to be in a position to buy it out and make his or her family whole, right? So early on, we get that under their belt to say, okay, what does that number need to be? Let's finance against it, whether it be term or whole. There's another question there, but essentially, let's eliminate that fear of the family ending up with nothing and the business unable to produce cash flow to buy them out. So that's an important thing to do. What can you do to minimize the fear and set that aside for the CEOs so they're not running in this, partly on the, the right foot, left foot on the brake and right foot on the gas. And this, we need to address them early. And I think we did a good job with the products, but it's just a tool, right? So we need to follow through. And, Ed and I were debriefing on a call. We had a joint call the other day, and this guy, has a 85 on all his numbers. And, but when he starts answering a lot of questions, he's so integral to the business. It does run okay with him not being there, but certainly it would fall apart if he was not there, over along like a month or so. And it's he says it's worth 25 million, maybe 20 book says 10, but anywho, that's a lot of money to be leaving out to be covered with a life insurance product. So at some point they gotta, deal with the fear of the loss of you being gone and what's the family going to do. And I think that's helpful to address that early on. And I don't know how we translate it, but if the insurance is a lever to de-risk it for the owner's mind, it might be something to entertain. So.
Yeah. Okay. Barry just had to drop off, and I actually will in a couple minutes as well. That's a great point. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I've got a quick question on that point. So Clarity asked in a business, something along the lines, can the business survive without the owner? What is everyone's opinion? I frequently use 3 months. If you're gone for 3 months, the business continues running along just fine, or maybe gets better without you. Does anyone have a better number? Just a minor point.
That's a long time frame, actually.
Yeah, that's a disability time
frame.
frame.
Yeah. I mean, people literally will tell you that this business can't run without me for 2 weeks. So I would just, as a test, start with 2 weeks and see where their mindset is around the dependency of the business on them at just 2 weeks. Because 2 weeks is a good summer holiday time. And some will say they can't do that because the business is too dependent on them, or they think it is.
Well, I make it 3 months because it moves it beyond the vacation period, and it gets to if he or she's gone for some extended, whether it's 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, then that the business can actually run without you.
But a part of the conversation we're having on owner dependence is the burden they feel as an owner on them, and there's a frustration and emotion with that. And if they can't go away for 2 weeks, as they get older, there's a lack of quality of life in running their business, and it could create issues even at home.
Yep.
So, I can see that as the ends of the spectrum there, 2 weeks, 3 months.
What I like about 2 weeks is that, we all take week-long vacations, even though we all know that we should take 2 week and month-long vacations. But a 2 week vacation, you say to a business owner, okay, have you ever taken a 2 week vacation? And you're probably going to get a head shake, and then you're going to ask, why not? And if they have, I agree with you, somewhere between 2 weeks and 3 months. 3 months, though, is like disability. I had major surgery and then I had to go through rehab and now I'm back. Probably more likely than I decided to go live in Zambia for a quarter.
And there's an interesting point here. We're looking at owner dependency. That's that 2 week, 3 week holiday, where I don't get any phone calls and stuff. If I'm gone for 3 months, 4 months, that business is operating not with the owner, without the owner, but without, let's call it the CEO. Mm-hmm. So what is the role of the CEO in the business? You want as the CEO, the business to be ticking along, with your management team doing the day-to-day stuff, you're focusing on the strategic stuff, but there's still a role for that CEO. So that's why for me 3 months will be a bit long. The owner dependency means to me that business runs without me having to ask every day a question of the CEO. How do we do this? What do we do that? This, that, this guy's phoning me for this, it's all that sort of stuff. Well, not the running of a business. It will require a CEO, I would hope. But the business is ticking along with the management team, etc., with the CEO working on the direction and the strategy and on the business stuff. That's how I would see it.
And if we think about business flow and a scorecard, right, a flash report on the business, and this is obviously tiny, nobody can read it, but this is tracking week by week to week. What is our gross, our net, our margin, our net promoter score, our AP, our AR? Where are we on our strategic initiatives? Red, amber, green. How is this going? And if the CEO gets into the habit, if we can educate them into the habit of sitting at the head of the table and not leading the meeting, what are we doing? Think about the impact. And I know that's what we all advocate, but for those of you out there watching this, what impact are we having when the senior team is collaborating around these numbers and understanding their role and the intersections of their roles in generating the expected results, the on target results? So just a digression, but yeah, that's a great point, Andy. And the fundamental role of the CEO is to maximize shareholder value within the context of the vision and mission. And that is a different role than the president. So
George, I have one last question. Larry, who do you like, the Rangers or the Phillies?
Oh, what, are you kidding me?
I'm just asking.
I'm sorry, baseball. I thought you meant hockey, which began last night, the New York Hockey Rangers. No, I'm going to root, believe it or not, I'm going to root for Philly. I got friends who are Philly fans, and I think they got that right mix.
Okay.
Philly's having a heck of a year, right? So far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question, but the answer should have been the Yankees, Mike. And
I know, but
you're dead. I'm going to run.
Yeah, I got to go.
I haven't been on in a long time, but
run.
Great seeing everyone.
Yeah, great seeing you all. Thank you very much. That was fun. All right. Have a great week, everyone.
All right. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.